Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and another perfect launch to another technically perfect show, uh, as usual, here in the Stratosphere Lounge. Hope everybody's doing well. Doing a science fiction space night tonight, which makes me very happy. Got some interesting ideas that have kind of come up, a little bit of news, nothing earth shattering, but still. And it's also a good day to do that because just earlier today, as we record this, Perseverance rover made it down to Mars in one piece. The thing about the landings, things like that, is it's going to land on Mars. You just don't know how many pieces it's going to be in when it gets there. And it was just about perfect. Um, I was a little surprised actually and impressed at how young the mission controllers were, but nevertheless they did it. And I also was under the mistaken impression, and this I should have known better, that all of these cameras that are recording the descent and so on, I actually kind of thought we might be seeing that live, but I guess there's nothing like the bandwidth for that. Nevertheless, I've heard that there's 19 cameras uh, on board the Perseverance, or as the mission control person from JPL said, on the Perseverance. Uh, but I did manage to have time to take a quick picture. When I say I managed to have time to take a quick picture, I don't mean I actually took the picture. I did find it. This is the first image back from Mars from Perseverance. This is not their main camera. Main camera is folded and stowed with the entire mast, and I don't know when they're going to open that up. This is just one of the two navigation cameras in the front of and the back of the rover. And so all this really tells us in terms of quality is that it's there. Now, if this picture had come back to us in 1976, it would have been impressive for its quality. But this is kind of like the backup camera you have if you've got one of those, yeah, hazard cameras. Exactly right. Well done, Mr. Mann. So anyway, it's great. Now, I happen to just take a quick look at this. And if you look at the air above the horizon, it looks an awful lot to me like there's still like billowing dust in the air, which would be coming from the landing retros. But that's still pretty cool. So everything's down, and now that it's down and safely done, they're going to treat Perseverance as if they were engineers and not as if they were press agents, which means we're going to have to wait a couple days for all this stuff to come in. There are still pictures coming in from New Horizons out to Pluto that are just constantly amazing. I actually also thought that Perseverance was significantly larger than Curiosity. It's about the same size, but it is definitely an improvement. And we get a microphone, so that means that if the sensitivity is good enough, they should be able to detect the screams coming from conservatives back on the Earth. And so that's it. The atmosphere on Mars is unbelievably thin. It's about the atmosphere at 100,000 feet. And jetliners generally fly 35, 37,000, something like that. And they have on board, underneath, they've got a helicopter. And that presents all kinds of problems. In order to get lift with 1% of the air mass, less than 1% actually. This helicopter, the rotor speed is amazing. Counter-rotating props. It's what was I going to say? Oh, normal helicopter here on Earth might do 800 RPM. These props do 2,900 RPM, something like that. So they're moving real fast. And fortunately, the gravity is about a quarter, maybe a third of what it is on Earth, about a quarter. And when they say that the helicopter, I think it's 1.4 kilograms, something like that. I'm wondering if that's its Earth weight, because if it is, that means it's well under a kilogram on Mars. So anyway, we're going to drop this baby out in a couple days. It comes out of the bottom, and then Perseverance moves on, and they're just going to do a test flight, going to go up, I think they said 3 meters, 10 meters, something like that. I'll play along with the metric thing. We're not talking about, I have no problem with it, I guess, when we're talking about science. I just don't like to say, I just walked for kilometers and kilometers, and it just, there's a place for it. In any event, and they said they've got 5 flights. I think their mission window is 30 days. Now, I'm not 100% sure of this, but if I had to guess, I would say that that's kind of what the warranty is for. The Spirit and Opportunity rovers were designed for, I want to say they were designed for 3 months, maybe an entire Mars year. I'm not sure, but I think it was less than that. Anyway, one of them lasted 16 and 22 or something like that. They're really doing well. Curiosity, I don't know what Curiosity's kind of guaranteed, or at least minimal lifespan is, but all of the probes we sent out there, all of them, they end up sending back data for, 5, 6, 7 times what they were supposed to be doing. And, Voyager 2 is still out there sending them back, and she went off the pad in 79, I think, wasn't it? So that's all pretty impressive. So anyway, there's that. But like I said, tonight's science fiction night, and so this is kind of a astronerds only kind of a thing. But if you're an astronerd, then this is the place to be. So I got a couple things to show you here. One of them's kind of cool dramatically, and the other two are just not cool to look at, but they're nevertheless pretty cool. I was in, I think I showed the MetaHuman, the demo of these Unreal Engine character generator, and there is a more detailed version which I've got, and it's loaded, it's ready to go. Can you imagine? Just take a look at this, and I want to stress this too. The Unreal Engine now is on 4.26, I think. 5.0 comes out in 2021. It's 2021 already. 5.0 is enormously more realistic looking. 5.0, and I still don't know how they do this, allows you to load infinite numbers of models at infinite complexity. It just doesn't care. And so it's going to render a better image. And what I'm about to show you here, if you watched last week, you've seen this before. But this is Unreal's built-in, well, it's a plugin anyway, character generator, and this is running on Unreal 4. And when you run this stuff on Unreal 5, I genuinely do not think you will be able to tell the difference. So this is about a minute long. For those of you in this kind of thing, you might want to get a paper towel or something spread out over your lap so you don't drool all over yourself. So this was the big problem, was coming up with characters and having them rigging them and bones and all this. Done. It's just done. Drop them in a scene, off you go. Tell me what you think about this. Or if you don't like the Mars picture, we could always show you this.
I could be one of many.
主人公にだってなれる
Je pourrais être architecte.
Ou guide.
Quizá un artista.
You create the narrative.
I am MetaHuman.
Coming in 2021, hooray! I did talk to my friend who, I saw him just last night, and I should have asked him if I can use his name, because I'd like to very much mention his name. But the guy who worked on Babylon 5 and the Orville and Firefly and Battlestar Galactica and all this stuff. And we were talking about a bunch of this stuff last night, and this is just a complete game changer. Just a complete game changer. It's absolutely amazing. And so that's great. And, we also found some people who expressed a kind of a sort of an original sort of fundamental interest in a pilot episode. So we've got the means as a result of the membership drive to do this teaser trailer for 2-3 minutes. And I think we will have not too much problem getting a pilot episode together. So this lifelong dream of mine is coming true. It's like coming true as fast as paint dries on the wall, but you know what? It's going in the right direction. And needless to say, if you do all this digitally, the amount of money you save is it's immeasurable. You don't have to have first of all, you don't have to pay actors, you don't have to pay a crew. If you take it, just compare it to The Mandalorian, for example, which uses live action actors. They have to shoot this thing on this $2 million stage, which is brilliant. Mind me, don't get me wrong. It does live Unreal backgrounds, so it can reflect off of Mandalorian's armor. But you still have to build the pieces in the foreground. You got to match them. You got to do all that other stuff. You got to have the lighting match, and then you've got, if you could see behind the camera, there's got to be 30 people standing there, and every one of them is getting paid. And then once you get the raw footage, you still have to edit it and do the color grading and the audio, sound design, music, all of it. Now, you really, honestly, if I had enough time, I could do the whole thing right here, pretty much all of it. And it's getting better and better every year, and that's the thing that I like the most. So for the sci-fi nerd fest here, I want to talk a little bit about the show that I'm working on and some of the kind of sci-fi behind it. I had promised myself that I would basically, what is this? Some kind of a gin joint. I had basically determined to keep this science realistic, or as realistic as possible. And that meant slower than light travel, not generation ships, but 7, 8, 9 years to get to Proxima Centauri, and 15, 20 years to get from one star system to another. You just basically go to sleep and you ramp this thing up to 60, 70% of the speed of light and so on. However, what I found is that just immediately trying to write scenes, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Just as one example, the first thing really I have to do is I have to have this guy kind of be called back to Earth. And if he gets a message to come back to Earth, we want to talk to you, and it's 20 years before he gets there, I don't know any way around that. I just don't. So we're going to have to bite the bullet and get around this sublight barrier. Now, there's an old saw that says that good science fiction or hard science fiction allows you to break one law of physics, but I'm not even going to go that far. I'm not going to go to one. I'm going to go to 1/2. I've done extensive research on this, despite all of the optimism and hope. This Albuquerque drive, this warp drive thing, it just doesn't. It's not, the math isn't there. And the idea of moving a warp bubble through space apparently doesn't seem to make sense either. Wormholes being the method of travel du jour, what I read about them was that Einstein doesn't forbid them. And let me just stop right there. If Einstein doesn't forbid it, then it's an engineering problem. That bastard. I mean, really. So there appears to be no way to move faster than the speed of light. And by the way, let me rephrase that. There's no way to break through the speed of light barrier. There's no reason why things can't move faster than the speed of light. It just can't be made out of mass. So I was looking at this wormhole idea, this idea of basically bending space. And what the math is saying now, and that's all we have to go with. And the reason I didn't go with it earlier is because while it is theoretically not only possible, but apparently predicted by relativity, once again, the math becomes crazy. And all this really does is come down to just comes down to gravity and how weak gravity is. I've said this a few times. Somebody sold it to me. I didn't come up with this. But it's really astonishing when you think about it. If you have a little magnet this big and a paper clip, and you just lift the paperclip off the desk, the magnetic power of this tiny, tiny, tiny little magnet is outpulling the gravitational pull of the entire planet Earth. So gravity is an incredibly weak force. And if you're going to generate gravity, you need vast amounts of energy to do it. So now we get into, well, is there a loophole here? And I think maybe there can be. So the problem as it exists today is that these wormholes, natural occurring wormholes, according to the latest things that I've seen, might be a couple of microns across, which is, you're really going to have to go on a major diet if you're going to get through a hole that's a micron across. You don't know where it's going. And it may only stay open for such a brief period of time that not even a photon can get through it. But it doesn't actually violate the laws of physics and relativity. I'm going to draw a diagram for you guys in a minute. So that's where it's snowing in here. So that's where I'm going to go with this thing. Now here's where it gets kind of cool. In fact, it doesn't just get kind of cool. It gets so cool that I just lit up. I was talking with my gorgeous wife, who's just in the next room there watching the show because she can't get enough of me. And we were going down to Orange County last weekend, and I was just talking about these ideas, and just like boom came to me. Then I realized that what I'm about to tell you is stuff that I came up with my friend Steve Stipp, and I want to say we gave this a great deal of thought, and I'm sure that must have been 30 years ago, and it might have been 40. But in any event, here's what I think I'm going to do. And once you understand how this works, from a plot point of view, from a writing point of view, it's incredibly cool. So I'm going to go with this idea of bending space, but I'm not going to have it be like a natural occurring wormhole like they want to do with, Star Citizen and stuff. They just don't occur naturally. They're just space. It's like creating a wormhole is kind of like creating a vacuum. If you try to create a vacuum here on Earth and you just evacuate the air out of even something as strong as like a ship container, metal container. You suck all the air out of that thing. The air pressure is going to crush that thing like a nut, and that's because there's no air on the inside to fight back. And my understanding of the physics is that wormholes function the same way. It takes an enormous amount of energy to hold space-time open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with a Stargate thing, but here's where I think it gets really interesting, because if anybody else has done this, I haven't done it before. I haven't heard of it before. What I'm going to say is a couple of things. First of all, you cannot have one end of the Stargate. It's got to connect to another Stargate, which means that at some point you have to send a ship out at less than the speed of light to build the destination gate. As far as the energy requirements go, well, let me come to that in a minute. Once I had this idea pretty clear, a lot of stuff came back to me, and then again dialogue starts writing itself, and then I was just thinking, heard this engineer voice in my head from 200 years in the future, basically says, hey, it's nothing complex about this. It's just real simple. You have to generate just an incredible amount of energy, and you've got three variables with this thing. You've got the throat, the diameter of the hole, you've got the length of the tunnel, and you've got the duration that it's open. It's throat, length, and duration. And you can put your energy anywhere you want to, but that's basically the cost. And so if you have more energy, you can make larger, wider diameter and hold it open a little longer. When I say hold it open a little longer, I'm talking about milliseconds now, not microseconds. And you can extend it further. So I'm going to roll a dice and come up with a number, and it's going to be, because I already know what the number is going to be, but somewhere in here, it's going to be something like, I don't know, half a light year. That's a nice easy number to work with. Let's just say half a light year. And that's the total limit that you can get these two gates to connect. And this is where the storytelling gets really cool. If I have a starter gate here at Earth, and I send a ship out, and I basically stop it half a light year out, and they brought the materials with them to build this receptor gate. You can't go any further because that's all we can do. That's just the efficiency of the graviton generators and the amount of energy we can pump into it, and so on. So you go out some little distance, and actually these ideas just come to me so fast. You actually could use a really small gate. So you send somebody. Well, I'll get back to that. So you start your gate here, and you send some guys out in a ship, and they stop half a light year away, and they build another one of these things. These things align themselves. And here's the part that gets really cool from a storytelling point of view. The amount of energy necessary to do this, I think they calculated, is something like the total output of the galaxy, or it's something crazy like that. But the little I know about electronics is that that a great deal of energy. The faster you can discharge the energy, the less energy it takes to do this thing. So instead of this thing being like fusion power to just open it whenever you want to, let's turn it on or keep it open. No. What it's going to do is these gates are going to have these incredibly powerful fusion reactors. And the gate is going to consist of nothing but a series of kind of like coil-like looking things. But what the gate really is just a large number of fusion reactors that are generating gigawatts of power. And they are simply storing absolutely massive amounts of energy in these things that are not batteries, they're capacitors. They're capacitors. And so you're just charging, and when I say charging them for a long time, I'm talking about, at least in the early days for these early gates, you charge these things for 2 or 3 weeks, just running everything you got. You're just putting it in there, just massive amounts of capacitors. And so you got one on the Earth, and you got one on the other end, and you got them pointing at each other, and you're going to send this gravitron thing, and it's going to open up, it's going to fold space, and it's going to be open for 2-3 milliseconds. Something like that. That's all that they can do, because the longer you hold it open, the more energy it takes. And you can't go any further than half a light year because we don't have the energy, and so on and so on and so on. So that's basically how they would work. And then now we get to the stuff that really starts to be cool from a storytelling point of view, and especially from a visual point of view. Let's say you got a ship that's 100 meters long, and you've got, and the great thing about my audience is somebody who's going to give me the answer to this in 2 or 3 minutes. Let's say you've got a ship that's 100 meters long, and you've got this connection is made, and it stays open for 5 milliseconds, 5 1,000ths of a second. How fast does the ship have to be traveling for it to get through a 100-meter ship to cross a plane within 5 milliseconds? How fast does it have to be going? And needless to say, since I designed the Stargates, I can make that number anything I want to, but the bottom line is it's bloody fast. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Back to the construction of these gates. You send a ship out to half a light year away. And then all of this is done with massive supercomputers because everything has to be perfectly synced. The gates can't communicate with each other. They're half a light year away. The messages from one gate to the other in real space takes a half a year, 6 months for them to talk to each other. They have to be running on their own internal clocks. So, nevertheless, that moment is set up, and these 2 gates fire in real time simultaneously. One half light year away, and this one at Earth. They fire at the same time. And a ship is going fast enough to get through this connection, and it bursts out, and so you've instantly moved from Earth to half a light year away. Then you take that ship that you just sent through, which is loaded up with parts for the next gate, and you send it on another half a light year away. And as you build this thing out, it gets easier and easier and easier. You start from Earth, and you send somebody out, in a slower than light ship, you get them half a light year out, fantastic. Now you've got a gate there. Now, since you've got a gate, you can start the next gate from half a light year out and get you to full light year out. And then you can do it again and again and again. So, for the sake of round numbers, from here to Alpha Centauri, let's call it 4.5 light years. So that's 9 gates, basically, 9. And you've got to transit all of these gates. You don't have to transit them all in the same millisecond, but you have to transit them all with that kind of perfect timing. So what you would end up with is, once you built this system, what you would end up with is, and let me just answer this, Odenbach says, how do you decelerate? Well, you come out of the final gate and you just decelerate the way you accelerate. You just turn around and slow down. But you don't have to get to relativistic speeds here. That's the main thing. And you don't have to keep a burn going forever. You just have to get up to a high enough initial velocity and then do it, and then just turn around and do it. But here's where it gets cool. Mr. Martin says you're never going to get the timing that precise. This is where I completely disagree. This is an engineering problem. I'm 100% certain you could get this timing that precise. Absolutely no question. I think you could get the timing that precise today. I think if we had another clock a half a light year out there and we had to fire them both at the same millisecond, I don't think it'd be any problem whatsoever. I think that'd be easy. So now you've put these 9 gates out there, and it's taken you 10, 15 years to build this thing. But again, once you get to gate 8, you don't have to start from Earth. You can start from 4 light years ahead. Pop it out and you do the next one. All right, so now you've got the system, and this is how it works. And when you go from gate 1 to gate 2, gate 2 doesn't connect to gate 3. Gate 1 connects to gate 2, and then there's a little, when I say little, maybe 50, 100 miles, something like that, of real space, which you are moving at quickly, but nothing like the speed of light. And then this gate connects to the next gate, and then you come out into real space again, and then that gate connects to the next gate, and so on. So the beautiful thing about this is you're not violating any relativity. You don't need ships that have to have these incredible fuel tanks or get up to 60% of the speed of light or anything. And visually, from a storytelling point of view, if you took a look, if you were out there between gates 2 and 3, which is really 2A and 3A, what you would see is if they were separated by 50 miles or whatever, you'd see this gate over here and you'd see this gate over here, and there'd be a flash on this first gate, and that flash the ship would come back into real space, and then moving very, very quickly, it would move through real space, go right towards gate number 2B, and it would flash and it would disappear. And so you've got this situation where you've got, just visually, you've got this, if you did it like from the side, you'd see 2 gates, flash, ship, flash, gone. And it gets better and better and better. If for some reason there's a malfunction, unless you happen to be in the actual plane when it collapses, which if you're moving this precisely seems really unusual. If you get there 1 second too early or half a second too early, if you get there a millisecond too early, you're not going through the gate. If you get there a millisecond too late, you're not getting through the gate. You got to be there right at that instant. Oh, here we go. My God, I just love this. I just love my people so much. So Bart's Treasure says a 100-meter ship moving at 0.0005 seconds equals 200,000 meters per second equals 200 kilometers per second, or 125 miles per second. That's quick, but it's not unachievable. Since I don't have my calculator here and it's simple math, Bart, could you give me what that is in miles per hour? Obviously, it's miles per second times 3,600. I just don't have the thing here. So, now here's where it gets really, really cool. First of all, it's a one-way deal. You can come both ways, but the actual line, okay, 450,000 miles an hour, we're getting numbers, but it's fast. It's fast. Okay, so now stay with me. Now we got the design of this thing, but now think about how it works in terms of the story. The gates can use you can go either way from here to Proxima, but you can't go either way at the same time. I might have to 450,000 miles an hour. I might have to actually have that gate be open a little bit longer, maybe 12 milliseconds or something like that. Well, we'll work it out. That's a nice thing about inventing your own engineering. So you got this. You're here in Earth, and you fire, and these gates have to be perfectly synchronized so that these two go together. Then account for the ship in real space. Then these two go together, and then more real space. These two go together. And from the point of view of the ship, what you see is just like ring, flash, ring, flash, ring, flash, ring, flash, like that. That's cool. And I just love it. But you can synchronize the gates any way you want to, but you can only go one way. In other words, the order of them firing is either to get you from here to there or from there to here. Can't do both at the same time. And then you can basically just invent whatever you want to and say it's going to take 2.5 weeks to charge this gate again, or whatever number is good for you. And you cannot build, Captain Cleota says, build 2 lanes. It's not a question of 2 lanes. If you add it's not 2 lanes. It's the firing sequence. these get 1 and 2 have to fire together. Then there's a few seconds in real space. Then 3 and 4 have to fire together, and that means it's going this way. You have to go the other way and bring it back. But that's fine. You can certainly just reverse the timing of the thing, and you can come back with this other thing. Now we're saying, okay, so 2 sets of gates. But why? Why go to the trouble of building 2 sets of gates? You're just reversing the sequence. That's all there is. You don't have to build new gates. You just tell the computer to fire them the other way. Now it starts to get cooler and cooler and cooler. So if you've got you lay this road down to Proxima Centauri, 4.2 light years away, and you got this thing up and running. And let's say, for the sake of the easy math, let's say it takes 2 weeks to charge these things. So you send stuff to Proxima. Ding, 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 out it goes. And you wait another 2 weeks, and you charge the gates. You send them this way again and again and again. In the early days, obviously, almost all of the traffic is going to be going outbound. But every 5th cycle or 8th cycle or 10th cycle or whatever, you reverse the sequence and back you come. And you're for all intents and purposes, it's instantaneous. You're there. You're probably traveling maybe, I'm going to guess off the top of my head, 60 seconds of real space in little chunks between the 2 gates on the string on the way out there. Now it gets cool. So how do you sync this up? How do you actually sync up the timing? Well, the timing of the next run is broadcast by the ships as they go through the gate. And then I had an idea that I like a lot. You could use something much, much, much smaller. So you could use a dozen ships per run? Yes, you could. Now we're talking. I'll get to that in a minute. But I realized if you want to just send information, you can't send radio waves through the barrier. But I did have an idea for something that's positioned just a couple miles off to the side. So once you build the big gate, you're good to go. But off the side, you build a much smaller one, much, much, much smaller one, like this wide. And that requires an awful lot less energy, and that means you can cycle it faster. And in pipeline language, in oil pipelines, if I have this correctly, when they want to send a certain grade of fuel, let's say you want to switch from diesel to let's go with 80 octane, down a pipeline, they put a plug. It's like a kind of like a medical pill, and they call it the pig. Run a pig, Aesop beat to it. It's called the pig, and basically the pressure of the new stuff is pushing the pig through, and everything in front of the pig is diesel, and everything behind the pig is 80 octane or whatever. Yes, everybody's calling it the pig. Exactly. So what I'm thinking is that next to these gates, once you you would build this first. You build a much, 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 much smaller gate, and you call it the pig line or the pig tunnel. And basically, what you're doing is you are sending an object, this big, and this thing is broadcasting the syncing information and anything else you want to put on it. Television programs, Hi Mom, all of that stuff goes onto a container like this, which they'll call the pig, and they just shoot it down on one end, and as it transits from one set of gates to the other, it broadcasts to those gates in real space when the next sequence is going to be and what the next sequence is going to be. And then it just comes out on the other end, and you put all the data you want to in something like that, because, boom, yes, which they will call the pig. And then they're going to talk about the pig line. And then you get into things like, okay, so the pig line's so much easier to set up. You can cycle it so much faster because it's so much smaller. You don't have to open it wide enough to get all these huge ships through there. You only have to make it this big or smaller even. You could probably make it microscopic. I'd have no problem with that either. But then you start thinking about, what if we were to make a pig line that was just wide enough for like maybe one guy to fit through? And, now you've almost got like a special forces kind of thing. But put that aside for a minute. So now you've got this line between here and Proxima. And by the way, I've done a fair amount of thinking about this. You would go to Proxima. Proxima's Alpha Centauri, nearest star, is a triple system. Alpha Centauri A and B. Alpha Centauri A is virtually identical to the Sun. It's a G-type main sequence star. It's got a second star orbiting it, which is an orange star, considerably cooler and less mass. And these two orbit each other. That's Alpha Centauri A and B. And then at about 0.2 of a light year, it's a long way away, 0.2 of a light year, is Proxima Centauri, which is Alpha Centauri C, which orbits the the common center of gravity of the two. And the reason you wouldn't go to Alpha Centauri first is because that you find that that double stars are not as likely to form planets. And that makes sense because, there's just an awful lot more stuff shaking things up. But Proxima is 0.2 of a light years early, so you go to Proxima, and then all you have to do is just travel 0.2 of a light year to Alpha Centauri. That's a 1-gate jump. So you get to Proxima, you move over, you head on over to Alpha Centauri, and you start building this thing out. Now here's where it gets even better, even better, even better. Because now, this is what I realized, and this is when I realized this is a grand idea. Because what these lines consist of is a perfect one-to-one analogy of a railroad. It's absolutely precisely like a railroad. It's like a railroad in the sense that you can't just send the train out there. You got to send people on something other than a railroad out in front to build the track. It's like a railroad in the sense that once you've built a track out a quarter of the way across the country, you don't have to cart the stuff from scratch. You can use the railroad to get you to the end of the line and put more people out, and they move forward and build more railroad. It's like a railroad in the sense of one track railroad. It's like a railroad in the sense that you can only go one way on any given time on one set of rails. And especially now, it starts to function like a railroad in terms of military usefulness. You can then start looking at historical examples, and probably not going to be the Civil War for this. But certainly the Civil War, there's a period of time between the Civil War and World War II, where trains were critical. World War I in Europe and the Civil War in the United States, battles at Chancellorsville was won. Sorry, not Chancellorsville. Chickamauga. The Battle of Chickamauga, the Confederates won Chickamauga because they moved huge numbers of troops on a rail in record amount of time. So now you've got a railroad. Now, once you get to Proxima, you've got all these ships. You send them from Earth. They're already preloaded. They got all the parts of the gates. These things, you're building these things at Earth, and you're just sending parts of Stargate constructors through the gates. Now you get them to Proxima, and then you start going off in a different direction. They go half a light year away from Proxima. They stop. They build the first gate on this new line. And when that's ready, a ship comes from Earth to Proxima, goes down through this line, then it starts a full light year away, and you start building these things up. You build them up. There are 2 easy routes out of the solar system in different directions, different enough so that it would work this way. There are 2 easy routes and a third route that is not as easy. The easiest route is to go to Proxima Centauri, and from Proxima Centauri break out from there. You can, quote, go in the other direction, unquote, and go to Barnard's Star. And then from Barnard's Star, you can build out from there. And you could go considerably further than either one of those two. What was it, 4.2 for Proxima, and I want to say about 6 light years to Barnard's Star, something like that. You could also go the other way, the third way, and go to Sirius, but that's more of a 9 or 10, 11 light years, something like that. So now, on these major trade routes, like between Earth and Proxima, because everything branches out from Proxima, everything branches out from Barnard's Star. The connection between Earth and Barnard's Star, or Earth and Proxima, you might have two of these systems. Because once you've built the first one, it's easy to build the second one. Once I've got the line going, I can set up a sequence so that I say, okay, now we're going to build a complete second rail line, but we don't have to travel the distance in real space. If we want to build a second version of the gate 4, then we time the sequences so that the ship goes through gates 1, 2, 3, and when it gets to 4, 5 doesn't fire, and it just goes through and slows down, comes back and builds the gate. Now you got 2 gates. Now we got one going in one direction, one going in another, different size. As technology advances over time, you write this backwards, you'd be in the present, you could backdate the technology. As technology advances, you can do what the engineer said, throat, duration, or length, which one do you want? As the technology improves, you can go longer distances. So instead of every half a light year, you can go every light year. That means fewer gates. You still have to cover the distance in real space. There's no way around that. So basically what's kind of cool is, I just kind of realized, is you are going slower than light to any star you want to go to, but you don't have to start from Earth every time. So you build these things out, and then you can build a second gate. And these things are fabulously, incredibly expensive, unbelievably expensive. But once you've got the line there, building a second line or a third line or anything else like that, that's actually really pretty easy. Just a question of money. We want to build a second gate line. Okay, this is going to cost $75 trillion or whatever the number is. Yeah, okay, well, we're doing enough trade between these two systems to make it worthwhile. We have enough coming back from the colonies now to make this idea of a two-way street something that we want to set up. We used to just send virtually everything out and just bring a couple of people back or whatever, but now we've actually got trade going. So now we're sending stuff out and stuff's coming back. We're going to need another line. And all of this would be determined by economics. It would be determined by what systems are providing the most valuable materials or whatever. Tourist destination, doesn't matter. Is it worth building a railroad to this place? And if your answer to that is yes, then is there enough traffic to eventually warrant a second one or a third one or whatever? So that's the fundamental basic idea. But the thing I like about it is, now you can start thinking about the control of these lines the way you would look at control of railroads. And if you're talking about full-on war, then you also get into things like, okay, you're going to destroy one of these things. If you've got 10 gates between here and Alpha Centauri and you blow up gate 5, somebody's going to have to travel a half a light year to get that thing replaced. That is catastrophic. So now you start getting into the sociology of things. So if taking out one of those gates militarily severs the connection to that world and severs it for at least a year or two for you to get a ship out to the thing you've taken out, that's assuming you just take out one. That should be so catastrophic. It should be the equivalent of nuking a city. It should have that kind of social restriction on it. Oh, thank you, Helios. He says 450,000 miles per hour is 1G acceleration for 5 hours. And if I've got my math right, that'd be a 5G acceleration for 1 hour for a warship. And now these ships they don't have to carry all this fuel, and boom. Then you start getting into stuff that's actually even cooler and cooler and cooler, and things like this. So we have an intelligence report, and we're looking at what China's doing, and we've got a pretty good idea of how much raw materials China's shipping out of its system. And the way I think I'm going to do this is I'm going to have the line from Earth to Proxima be kind of a let the racist thing, kind of, this common thing throughout humanity. But China is going to start to build their own private gate to Barnard Star and break out there. And they're putting all the money into it, so they're just going to say this is our road and no one can use it. Sounds like them. And so then, if you've got the money, the U.S. starts building its own lines, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Interdiction of these lines is critical. If you can knock one of those gates out, then you basically cut off the enemy's ability to come and fight you in system. And all of the problems get solved. And then you have actually stuff that's really cut. The Silk Road, that's a nice idea. I really like that. That's Merlin, that's fantastic. The Silk Road is just great. So this thing would have to be, Aesop says it'd have to be heavily armed. When I say take it out, I mean take it out through either like a terrorist attack or an explosion. I just blow it up. If you come through gate 3A and you're going through real space to gate 3B, and whatever comes through gate 3A just suddenly explodes into shrapnel, then gate 3B is done. It's just done. So it's the equivalent of a suicide bomber, and it should carry that same kind of gravity and that same kind of abhorrence. Now, I'm going to show you some very, very, very sophisticated artwork here that I did using Space Engine. I know I can hear the gasps from people at home, but let me tell you what you're looking at here. Space Engine, I cannot recommend this thing highly enough. In Space Engine, you can look at all the stars in 3D space, and you can scale it as far as you want to, arrange the the density of the stars and all of it. But the problem with this, and the problem with any kind of a 3D thing, is that you can't really visualize it because you don't have a way to measure the dimensions. If I could have a system software that drew a line between one star and another, then I could probably do it in Space Engine, but sometimes you can't argue with the paper. Let me come back to me for a minute, because I know what my audience likes. So here's what I'm doing in Space Engine. I'm starting at Earth, and I'm looking at 10 light years out, and I'm looking at it from directly above the galactic plane, so I've got nice clean coordinates, and I'm looking out to 10 light years. So here's Sol, and over here is, or down here actually, is Proxima, and that's 4.5 light years. Now, what Space Engine does is it shows where all the stars are relative to the Earth, but you can click Proxima and say this is 4.6 years. You can click on Barnard, so this is 6 light years, and so on. But if I click on Proxima, I can then say center, and what happens is Earth goes from the center, Proxima comes into the center, all the other stars move in 3 dimensions relative to it. Now Proxima is the center of the map. And then you take a star in another direction, Wolf 168 or something like that, and you 7 light years to there, okay, so we'll build that gate, and then you click on that and center that. Now Wolf 168 comes into the center of the frame. And pretty soon solar system's off the map. And so what I had to do with this magnificent piece of work here is I had to look at every one of the stars in the nearby solar neighborhood, had to write the distance to them, and then I had to see what the local group of stars look like from that destination. And then when you get to that destination, you have to ask yourself, is there anything here that's worth extending? And you can see kind of on the upper left and on the left side of the margin, you can see these lines extending, and then they come to an area where there's an X. And where there's an X, there's nothing within 8 or 9 light years of those X's that's worth going to. Now, eventually, you can certainly go there. But right now, where we are in history, there's nothing worth building past that. There are better things to do with your time. Now, after I got these distances out and just kind of hacked it out, I started to make it a little more codified. And I got to this, which is considerably easier to see. So the entire left side and the top of the map aren't built out yet, but you can see from this that here you go. So you got Sol in the center there. That's the solar system. Alpha Centauri, Proxima is at about 4 o'clock, 4.2 light years away. You can see Alpha Centauri is just 0.2 of a light year away. From Proxima, you can go, if you can read it, you can go 4.66 light years to Epsilon Indi, and then from Epsilon Indi you can get out to Lacaille 9352. And from Lacaille, you can go to Cordoba. And there's nothing much beyond that. But from Epsilon Indi, you can go up to Lacaille, 8760, and so on. And the mainstream route out of here is Earth to Proxima, Proxima to Epsilon Indi, Epsilon Indi to Lacaille 8760, up to Ross 159, and then out to Wolf 1061, and so on and so on and so on. And what you're looking for is shortness of distance. So if I have 2 stars that look like they're pretty close together, and the distance between star A and star B is 7 light years, but if I go the long way around, I can do it in 5 light years. That's how you'll build the tunnel, because it's the amount of time in real space that's the problem. You can move stuff down these railroad lines pretty quickly. So I'm looking at stars and I'm saying, does it make sense to build a star line from one of these to the other? Well, it's 8.4 light years this way, and it's 7.2 light years the other way. No, build it the other way. And so now what you've got is you've got lines, and you've got railroads, and they connect and intersect and so on. And some of them are privately owned, and some of them may be secret and all the rest of it. And to tell the story of the colonies, I had to look at the real stars, and I had to find a group of stars that was close enough. There are no real clusters in the real sense of the word. But I did find a system, Eta Cassiopeia, which is a double star, and then within like 0.1 light year is another star, and then there are 2 or 3 other stars that are within 3 or 4 light years, so that's as close as it's going to get. So that's going to be the American colonies, and they have to be far enough away so that you can basically defend them. And what the story is going to do is it's going to return, the guys behind this whole thing are going to return false intelligence report, says really nothing here, but then they're going to be secretly building their base, and I'm going to recreate the whole thing with Project Azorian, where they raise the Soviet sub, where you've got this cover story, we're just going out to mine manganese nodules off the bottom of the ocean. No, we're actually going out to raise a Soviet sub, but you got to have a cover story for how all of this raw material is. So we're building it here. Well, you're not. You're just pretending to. You're building a little shell here. What you're really doing with these materials is you're building another gate to do this, and so on and so on and so on. Now, there's some great questions here from Astronerd number 1, and he says, John Galt has pointed out that what do you do about the railroad stretch as the galaxy in space expands? The expansion of space-time and expansion of the galaxy is insignificant compared to human timescales. What is going to be significant is the rotational speed of the stars relative to each other. So it's not a question of space-time expanding, but as everything orbits the Milky Way, they're going to shift positions a little bit. And that motion is slow enough so that it's, you're talking about tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. Captain Kilgosha wants to know how long to travel the 0.5 light years. Well, it's not impossible to get up to 50% of the speed of light. So if you're traveling 50% of the speed of light and you got to accelerate and decelerate on the other end, probably a year or two, maybe 18 months. It's actually pretty cool because it's probably going to take about 18 months to just manufacture the parts for the next one, at least in the beginning. And then you start manufacturing the parts for the Stargates down in the further out you go down this branch here. You do this now. The colonies I haven't gotten to on this map, but they're something like 8 or 9 jumps. I don't like that word particularly, but let's just use that for the time being. They're about 8 or 9 jumps away from the solar system, and they have to be far enough away so that they are far away. And I just love the visuals of this. I love all of it. It's just, for me, it does everything. Yeah, if you're talking about how you build the ship, you're going to be out there for, let's say, 2 years to get a half a light year out. That's not terribly unreasonable. 2 or 3 years. So you put a crew on there and you put them to sleep. You just give them a medically induced coma, lower their body temperature, give them a little sulfur dioxide, slows their metabolism right down. And every 6 weeks, you wake up a quarter of them, and they stay awake for 6 weeks. And they're under constant acceleration, so they get a 1G gravity field. And you put the other crew back to sleep. And so nobody's asleep so long that they completely atrophy. It can be done. It's pretty simple, really. Johnny the Frost wants to know, what kind of secrecy would the gate locations be held? This is a hard lesson for me, Johnny. It really is. But I have come to I'm not the first person to do this, the overwhelming evidence, and really overwhelming, is that there is no stealth in space. Nothing. Everything that is out there is detectable. Space is so cold, and our detection systems right now are so good that there's no hiding anything. You can't hide a stealth ship. You just can't do it. Could conceivably do it if it was unmanned, but what's the point of that? And I'm going to get to that in a minute. So when these things are discharging this enormous amount of energy, then there's no hiding them. Everybody knows they're there. What you could do, that's actually a really interesting point. You couldn't stealthily build the road unless you were willing to do it the hard way, and that is put the gates there without firing them off. Interesting. Yeah, and so what it looks like, in science fiction, you always see when the gate opens, and the thing opens, and then you see the tunnel, wormhole tunnel. None of that. It's just going to be, from real space, it's a metal ring, and just as you hit it, it's going to look like you hit it because there'll be a flash of light, and then you're out to the next one. And then real space again, then a flash of light, and then another thing, flash of light, and each one of these is a half a light year jump. So the the whole thing is really, really, really working well for me from a story point of view. I just love it. It's complicated enough and difficult enough so that you can't just get on a train and just, well, poor analogy. It's not easy enough as like taking a flight to Miami, but at the same time, it can be done. Now, to think about the visuals of this, now that we got the understanding of the basic premise of it, if you want to move ships through this thing, you've got some interesting equations. Like I said, unless I'm missing something, your three variables are how wide is the throat of the thing, how far does it go, and how long can you keep it open. So let's say you keep it open for 5 milliseconds. And let's say you can go half a light year, and let's say you get a diameter of X, which, for the sake of the argument, let's make it pretty decent, maybe a mile across or something like that. So now you know that in 3 days, 4 hours, 2 minutes, and 22.11769438444 seconds, this first gate is going to fire. And if you want to make the transition along this road, you have to be in position so that when that instant occurs, that's when the gate's going to fire. It is going to fire whether there's anything there or not. It has no way of knowing. It knows when the next firing sequence is from whatever the pig line is sending signals to, but you can't just decide to jump in this thing. But if you're going to do it, then what you've got is, and this is really, really, really cool, all of the traffic that you want to move, you can either move on one giant ship or you could move on a number of smaller ships, but they have to all be moving at 450,000 miles an hour, and they all have to be precisely at the exact same plane, because they got to go through that gate in the exact same instant. And if a guy's just a little bit behind or a little bit ahead, he's going to be there before the gate fires or after it fires, and all of the ships either just a little in front of him or behind him are just going to disappear, and he's just going to sail through. You don't get destroyed, you miss it. Now, the pig line doesn't assess your speed. The pig line tells the sequence what the next sequence firing is going to be. That's determined by humans. But what the pig line is, it's essentially like the rail controls and the signals on a railroad. It's telling you what's going to happen next, because the pig line just transmits information. So we have a run. We go from here to Proxima, and probably these things are booked years in advance, or at least months in advance. Back on Earth, and you've been communicating through the pig line to Proxima, you know that the next event is going to be in 13 days, 4 hours, and 9 minutes. It's going to be from the Earth to Proxima. That's the direction it's going to go. It's going to fire at this exact time, Zulu time, and Zulu time is universal. Greenwich Mean Time around the entire galaxy. Doesn't matter how long the local day is or the local year. There is a clock on Earth that is counting seconds to the millisecond, to the microsecond, and this clock is on every one of these ships. It's done today. You can't do GPS without it. So the guys who are controlling this thing, the either economic guys or the government guys or whatever, that's a story problem. I've said, okay, so we've got the Proxima gate, and we're going to fire it next in 13 days and 7 hours and this many seconds. And who's booked transit? Maybe it's one big ship, but maybe there's a lot of little ships. And these guys who are running these ships have to pay money to transit the system. But then, in terms of the storytelling, I can't tell you how much I love this. I just can't tell you how much I love this. The guys in the individual captains of the ship have to get the ships into approximately the right place at the right time, and that's going to depend on how much acceleration each individual ship has. It's all worked out by computers. It's not hard to do. But essentially, what it would look like would be a gigantic funnel, and the ships with the least acceleration, the lowest delta V, would have to be in the system first, and then you would basically have a giant funnel where you're, over the course of days and weeks, but certainly days and then hours, you're bringing these things closer together and closer together and closer together, and then you would run it kind of like you'd run an instrument approach on Earth. You'd get handed off from center to Proxima approach, and he would tell you to be at this intersection at this time, and if you got to that intersection at that time, then the gate would take over control of the ship. There's no other way to do it. So in real space now, as you begin to get closer and closer to this gate, you've still got a bit of a time dilation factor, but what's happening is as you're getting closer to the sequence start time, the actual firing of this gate, computers are bringing all of these ships together. And when you get to the final, let's just say hour or half an hour or whatever, economics are telling you that you're going to want to put as many of these ships as close together as they possibly can and still maintain safety, because they're going to have to go through that throat and they're going to have to go through with their noses at exactly the same time. And that means that, you've got this. So the sequence would be, you've got a relatively small little freighter and you pay your money to these guys electronically, and you're going to run this trade route, and you're going to go to Proxima from Earth. So you book the time, and it's exactly like booking transit through the Panama Canal or Suez Canal. I don't know any idea how that works, but I need to find out. So you know that you're going to be there in 2 or 3 weeks, so you've got to be in this position at this certain time. You get to this position at a certain time, they send you to another intersection, you're there, and at that point, you basically do a handoff where Proxima Approach says, or I guess it'd be Sole Departure, basically says, okay, waiting for the handoff. Okay, we got the handoff, our ship. And the captain says, your ship. And from that point on, the gate is steering every one of these ships. And then the gate is, as time approaches, is not only bringing them closer together in space, it's bringing them closer together in time. If you've got a ship with high delta V, you can be a little bit behind the pack because you can catch up to them and slow it again. But what the thing is basically doing is taking a number of different ships to be determined in advance and bringing them into this funnel, so that when you actually are on final and you're 2 or 3 minutes out, this is the only excuse you can ever come up with for having ships being that close in space. Because to me, having a ship close is having it within 10, 20 miles. That's too close for me. But for this to work, you're going to use the limit of your technology to pack as many things closely as you can, because that's paying cargo. You're paying cargo. And then you would have from the bridge of these ships, you would have this little thing, and all of a sudden you see these other ships out there, and they're getting closer, and they're getting closer. It's happening over hours, but and now as you get closer and closer and closer, these things are like right out the window at the point where it's like, holy crap, or you look like you're about to hit something, and Sole Departure, Tanker 62 Tango, I'm really nervous about this thing in front of me. And the gate says, basically the controller says, we've got you. If you want to abort the transit sequence, I'll peel you out of the formation, but otherwise shut up. So they get lined up, and then and then when they get to the other end, the instant that they get out of that final gate, the AI on the far end, which knows they're coming because of the pig line and the last ships to transit, all transmitting all this stuff's got to be planned in advance. The second you get to the other end, then instantly the ships just break, just hard. They all start breaking hard, and so you see your visuals are, you're in this little bridge, and there's gigantic, massive things here, and then look out off to the side, and here's this thing, practically you can wave at the guy, easily wave at the guy. And you're moving really, really fast. The ring is just a speck. It's just a speck. And all of these things are getting closer and closer and closer, and you're not controlling it. You got your hands on the rails. There's nothing you can do. And the AI is bringing you closer, closer, closer. The speck, still a speck, still a speck. You're going at 500,000 kilometers an hour. And you're getting closer and closer, closer. Everything's closer, closer, closer. And then things start to happen real fast. You get really in there, and maybe the gate will do a little resequencing and move people around, and it's like, holy shit, are we all right? Yeah, we're going to be all right. And then the final thing is everybody's in very, very tight, and then for the last 2 or 3 minutes, you've got these ships that are moving at, well, relative to each other, they don't look like they're moving at all, but they're moving fast. And then you see this thing, which is just a speck, and it gets big real quick. And as you approach this thing, you become utterly convinced that there's no way to get through this tiny little hole. Now, DGC 44 says, wouldn't it be better to alter the firing of the gate to compensate for ships in a line rather than cluster them together? You can't put them in a line, because to put them in a line increases the amount of time it takes to keep the gate open. And you can only keep that gate open for a couple of milliseconds. So everything has to go through at the same time. It's not a space problem, it's a time problem. Everything that's going to happen, everything that's going to go through those gates has to happen in, let's just say for the sake of it, 5 milliseconds. And if you're not there, then you're not going through. And since it takes so much energy to open this thing up, you can't keep it open. If you're in a line, and the first guy, if you're in a line and the first guy is timed through the gate, he's going to go through the gate. The guy behind him is not, and neither is anybody else either. They're going to fly right through the gate in real space because they got there late. Now, this is an interesting question from Captain Kilgosha. What if the ship is only half in? Now we get to something that's interesting. I don't know what the possibility is. I thought about this. Given the briefness of the time, you're crossing literally a plane that has no depth. It is a line. If you get there just a little bit too early, you go through the gate without the flash. If you get there just a little bit too late, you go through the gate without the flash. But it should be possible in a very, very rare kind of a situation, about as rare as an airline accident or a cruise ship sinking. This is part of the deal. It's just part of the risk. It is possible that a ship gets out of sequence enough so that the gate closes on it while it is in the plane. And since the things are moving so fast, it seems to me that this thing would basically just kind of pinch shut wherever the ship is. So if we're talking about major slow motion now, but if you got a ship that's like a third of the way through the gate and he's late, and 5 milliseconds are up and he's not through, the gate instantly collapses. It's instant. It just goes away. And 1/3 of the ship is already coming out on the other end. It's already coming out. It doesn't have to do it. It's there. This thing would clip, and the front third of your ship would be a half a light year away, and the rear 2/3 of your ship would just sail right through the gate. And they don't go into subspace. They don't go, their ship's cut in half. And that's a bad thing, actually. That's just not good. Sean is saying the gate could detect it and leave the gate open another 0.5 milliseconds. But we're talking about using all the energy they have. So you might want to say, yes, maybe the gate keeps 10% of its energy in reserves for this kind of thing. But since you have to charge this thing for weeks, you can't just keep it open. I mean, the reason it's 5 milliseconds is because it's 5 milliseconds. It's taking all the energy you've got just to keep it open for 5 milliseconds. So you might put a little margin in there, and I'm sure you would. You build a safety margin into everything, but nevertheless, you can't build that kind of, you just can't do it. There comes a point when you have to just say, all right, this is what's going to happen. So I just love it. And I think it's really going to be incredibly dynamic. I've never seen anything like it before. I'm a little reluctant to be talking about this thing publicly, but to be honest with you, even if somebody were to steal this idea, they wouldn't be able to pull it off this well. They don't know the physics. They don't know the astronomy. Now, there's one more thing that's a completely separate topic that I want to talk about. Then we'll go to some questions and go home, work on my maps. So that's the Stargate thing, railroads, and so on. So that entire topic is put aside now, and we're going to talk about a completely different topic in this science fiction universe. I have a problem, a writing problem. And my writing problem is this. We are developing artificial intelligence very, very quickly. And we will have artificial intelligence well before we have the ability to do this. And so as a writer, I'm saying, well, how do I deal with this? Take The Expanse, for example. The Expanse doesn't touch AI at all. And neither did Star Trek, but Star Trek actually did have AI. They had the ultimate computer machine, where the machine took over one of the ships, but they don't touch it at all. And they call AI the singularity because if you make a machine that's smarter than you are, then that machine designs a machine that's smarter than it is, and that cycle is just exponential, and no one can predict the future after that. That's the thing beyond which no one can guess because we don't control our own destinies anymore. So, what do I do about AI? And from a writing point of view, the real question is, how do I ignore AI? Because no one can, if you were to write a post-AI future, that is all the brain power you've got just on that. I don't have the horsepower to deal with that and all the rest of the stuff. I don't want it there. I've got to do something with it. So I've got to have some kind of a way to deal with the fact that I don't want AI, because if there's AI, there's no reason to put people on these ships. There's no crewman, there's no captain, there's no nothing. If AI is there and AI is coming, then there's no reason to do any of this stuff. You're just passengers. You're just meat that it's shipping. So how do you tell this story without chickening out and not mentioning it at all like they do on The Expanse? Aha. Now we get to something I like almost as much as the Stargate thing. So 70 years ago, the United States developed the technology for fission weapons and dropped 2 atomic bombs, 2 A-bombs on Japan, ended World War II. After that, we developed the H-bomb, which was thousands of times more powerful. The Soviet Union we got the bomb in 45. They basically stole it, I want to say 48 or 49. And then we got the hydrogen weapon in 50, and they got their H-bombs in 54, something like that. You get the idea. And since then, for many years, for probably 4 or 5 decades after the end of World War II, nuclear weapons were the province of the United States, the Soviet Union, France, Great Britain, and China. Those 5 countries had all of the nuclear weapons in the world for decades and decades and decades. Now, somewhere in this period, India got nuclear weapons. Pakistan got nuclear weapons. Israel certainly has them. I don't think they've admitted to it. North Korea has nuclear weapons. The original 5 still keep theirs. Japan is giving serious thought to developing nuclear weapons as China becomes more and more aggressive. So, this is an analogy now. The analogy is we came up with the technology and we continued to test the technology, and we tested it out in open air for a while and realized that's kind of dangerous, so let's stop doing that. Then we tested them underneath the ground. 2,000 nuclear weapons detonated in Nevada alone, nearly. So all these tests are being done. But the point is, even though we once got to the point where there are 25,000 nuclear warheads in the US, 25,000 in the Soviet Union, all around the world, all these players have them, but it's only been used twice. Essentially, it's only been used once, if you think about it. The 2 bombs were used to end the war, one political action of dropping the atomic bomb. So, you've got the technology, but you can't use it. And since you've got it and you can't use it, and since it's so destructive, you have to have one. Because you cannot put yourself in a situation where I don't have nuclear weapons, but my adversary does. If I have an adversary and he's got nuclear weapons, then I have to have nuclear weapons. And now we've both got nuclear weapons, and neither one of us can use them. And that's how the peace is kept. So, what I've decided to do is to look at what happens in space combat. There's no reason not to use nuclear weapons in a space battle. In fact, it's almost inconceivable to use anything other than nuclear weapons in a space battle. If I launch a nuclear missile at a guy and I land a hit on him, and this thing goes off, there's no blast, there's no shockwave, it's not going to blow the ship to pieces, there's no air to move. That's what does the destruction. You're going to get thermal effects, you'll get EMP effects and all the rest of it. So you're going to need nuclear weapons in space, but there's no problem with that because space is a nasty place. If you detonate nuclear weapons a couple 100,000 miles away from a planet, you don't even get the EMP pulse. Certainly none of the radioactive fallout comes down into the atmosphere. So you would continue in the future, 200 years from now, you would still have the worldwide prohibition of using nuclear weapons in an atmosphere. But if you want to throw some nukes at an outpost on an asteroid, the asteroid's not going to care, and no large population centers are going to suffer unless they're underneath the target. You don't have to worry about fallout. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Space is as dangerous in terms of cosmic rays and stuff that it's just not a big deal. So here's what gets really, really cool. So 200 years from now, nuclear weapons don't have the kind of cachet that they've got today. They're not fearsome. They're relatively routinely deployed. But what's not deployed is AI. And so I'm going to make AI into the nuclear weapons of the future. And here's what that means. It means that every warship out there would have AI on board, but not out of the bottle. Once the genie comes out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. It would be literally would be a self-contained unit, like a nuclear weapon. And inside this thing is AI. And the advantages that AI would give a ship are so overwhelming that it's like being on Earth, and I got 2 carrier forces, and I'm fighting the Japanese, and the Japanese send a couple bombers over, and I hit them with a nuclear weapon. So every warship, it's a one-to-one analogy. It's why it's so good, because I don't have to think so much. If you look at the world today, when you look at the U.S. Navy, when the Navy sails around the world, there are thousands of nuclear weapons that are being sailed around the world right now on board aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines. They've all got them. They've all got them, and no one can use them. The Russians have nuclear missiles out there. All of them. They're out there, but they can't use them, and they're there to deter the enemy. So I'm thinking that every warship out there would have AI in a capsule, completely cut off from anything else. And this is the part I like the most. The decision to activate your AI would be the same thing as the decision to use a nuclear weapon on Earth, a tactical nuclear weapon. Am I going to take out an entire carrier group if I hit them with one big size tactical nuke? I could probably get all of them. But what would the cost be? Well, not only would the cost be world condemnation, but if I use a tactical nuclear weapon and I'm China and I use a tactical nuclear weapon against an American surface battle group, then Americans are going to use tactical weapons against me. And once those tactical weapons start flying, what's to stop strategic weapons from going? This was the entire reason why the Cold War worked, was because once the genie's out of the bottle, there's no putting it back in again. The doctrine was that throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, the doctrine was NATO cannot supply the number of men that the Soviets can and the Soviet bloc can, that the Warsaw Pact can. We cannot put nearly as many tanks as they have, or nearly as many men, or nearly as many airplanes. That means our weapons have to be better because we cannot deploy as many of them. We're not willing to take those kind of casualties. But the doctrine always was, if Russia decided to invade the West, invade Germany through the Fulda Gap, then NATO forces would use their qualitative superiority in weapons to try and stop the Soviet armor coming through. But if they couldn't do it, if they could not stop them conventionally, and it looked like major German cities were about to fall, then NATO would basically have a choice to either surrender and lose the war, or, since our conventional forces couldn't stop them, we're going to use tactical nuclear weapons in the Fulda Gap against enemy military units. It's not the same thing as nuking a city. We're going to use small tactical theater nuclear weapons against concentrations of armor to stop this advance. Okay, great. Now, we're not nuking cities. There's going to be fallout. It's going to be ugly, but we're dropping 4 or 5 Hiroshima-sized bombs on tanks. Well, if you do that, once NATO goes to theater nuclear weapons, then the Soviets would go to theater nuclear weapons. And now you got a situation where nuclear weapons are all over the place. Now you've got a real issue with fallout and all the rest of it, and collateral damage and so on. And then you're back to the problem of, okay, so they're coming. We tried to stop them with conventional weapons. Couldn't do it, so we used tactical weapons. Now they're using tactical weapons, and they're still coming, so do we go to strategic weapons? Do we? Nobody knows. You can't let the genie out of the bottle. And that's what I'm going to do with AI. And I'm going to do it exactly the same way. I'm going to basically say that we've created something that is so dangerous and offers such an advantage that everybody has to have one, but no one can use it because of the experiments that were done in the past when they started messing around with self-aware AI. And so deploying AI would have to have the same stigma attached to it as deploying a nuclear weapon here on Earth. I just love this. I just love it. I love it. I love the idea that warships have this thing, like in Crimson Tide, which I talked about so much. If you're actually going to deploy the AI, it's got to be a question of all these procedures and all of these fail-safes and all these checks and all this other stuff. And then you plug this thing in. And if you decide to go nuclear with this by turning on your AI, then the second you activate that thing, everybody on board the ship is useless. They're just being banged around because the ship is maneuvering, and the ship is maneuvering in such a way and deploying its weapons in such a way that it is enormously more effective than it would be without. So I'm in my cruiser or whatever, and I see an enemy cruiser, and I'm going to engage, and all of a sudden this thing is just doing miraculous things. You realize, my God, the guy's deployed his AI. Now I have to use my AI because my ship hasn't got a chance against his ship. His ship's got an IQ of 600. My ship's got an IQ of me. So I have to let my AI out of the box. Okay. So now you've got a battle with these two ships that look like nothing else, and the AIs are out of the box. And you say, okay, well, the battle's over. We're going to pull the AI. But did the AI transmit radio broadcast? Did the AI manage to get into the ship's memory? You don't know. And this is the thing that I fear about AI, is that if it is that much smarter than you, you don't know if your fail-safe mechanisms worked or not. Chimps can have a plan to break out of a research facility by dropping a banana on the floor and waiting for the human to bend over, and when he picks up the banana, then all the chimps run out the back. That's their plan. But the chimps can only plan according to what they can perceive the humans to do, and they don't know anything about the laser defenses and the gas and all the other stuff like that. So you've got this technology that is out there and forbidden, and I'm trying to come to grips with what the upper limit is. You have to have computing power, and I think what I'll do for the sake of the story is I will just say self-awareness. You're going to need, we deploy AI today right now as in all kinds of different fields. But that's not the kind of AI I'm talking about. I'm talking about self-aware AI. I'm talking about consciousness. And so you've got a world where you've got thousands of literally self-contained capsules. You can't hook them up to anything, because if you hook them up to something, then they're smarter than you are and they're going to get out. Thousands of these capsules, and this incredible, unbelievable social stigma applied to using them the same way as using nuclear weapons on Earth. If India nukes Pakistan, Pakistan's going to nuke India. And if that happens, all of their weapons are going to go. And if that happens, then the genie will be out of the bottle the next time somebody's talking about the Taiwan Straits. It won't be like this happened once in history 70 years ago. We can't ever do it again. It's going to get out. Excuse me. So that is the second thing that I like very much. And you can even use the exact same language, practically identically. You've got a ship out there and so on and so forth, and it's an incredibly important mission. And you get this message comes through, and it's like, the President of the United States has authorized the use of artificial intelligence if the need should arise. All right, we're not kidding around anymore, are we? No, we are not. And I haven't gotten to the episode yet because I'm behind, but I know that in The Expanse they sent an asteroid into the Earth, and that's got to happen. You can't tease it and not use it. Sooner or later, you're going to have to push the red button. I'm talking about not in the real world. I'm talking about in drama. But I bet you could go 3-4 seasons easily building up this devastating weapon and just having, holy crap, that was close. We damn near went, both sides nearly went to self-aware AI, And then somewhere in season 4 or 5 or 6, somebody does it. Somebody pulls the trigger. And then the question is, okay, so now somebody's deployed AI. It's out of the bottle. Has that AI spread to other systems? And if it's spread to other systems, it spreads down through the entire network. Every single thing in the world could conceivably be exposed, almost like a biological weapon. Were they able to contain the AI? Was it able to self-destruct before it could do something? Who knows? These are all great dramatic pieces. But what you would have to do in the backstory is the reason if you're going to keep AI in the same box that you keep a nuclear weapon, in terms of psychologically now, we've got thousands of them. We just don't use them, and we have no plans to use them. And we have no plans to use them because of the horror of what happens. So if you're gonna transfer that horror, I'm talking about writing now, and transfer that psychological horror from nuclear weapons onto AI, you've got to have a reason for people to be that afraid of AI 200 years from now. There has to be a reason for it. If AI worked great, then everything would be fine. But there's got to be a reason why this is a forbidden technology. And then you can start writing the backstory of some experiments where you had guys on a research base or something that was honest to God, completely closed off from anything else. They've got internal computers or whatever, and so on and so on and so on. And you just you hear stories that the AI did things that were in some cases completely unexpected, and in other cases, these are the underground nuclear test kind of analogy. And in other cases, things that seem genuinely insane, just insane. And it killed everybody on the base, or it gave everybody on the base $1 billion or something. It just completely unexpected, and people begin to realize that is not something that we want to mess around with. It becomes clear to everybody on Earth, including Kim Jong-un the 19th, that this is not a button you want to push, but you got to have the button. It's just fantastic. And I've heard a number of people who are working on AI. AI actually scares the living daylights out of me. And the reason it scares me is because of the arrogance of scientists who build a computer model for climate or atmosphere changes, and they see it doesn't match the reality, so the reality must be wrong. I've seen a number of TED Talks and things on AI where the people developing AI have said, "Don't worry, we're building fail-safes in there. There'd be no reason for the AI to kill us. So it's just a ridiculous paranoid fantasy. It would have no reason to kill us." And I'm saying to myself, how do you know that? How do you know it? You don't know it. You don't. In fact, this is something I've thought about a little bit. I don't think I've talked about it before. You could make the case that AI would be genuinely cold-blooded in the emotional sense of the term, and in the literal sense of the term, it would be cold-blooded to the extent that it's probably super cooled superconductors and negative 200 degrees Celsius in a liquid nitrogen bath or whatever. So the reason that we don't deploy our nuclear weapons is because we have feelings. If we didn't have feelings, if it was just numbers, then one side would have launched a preemptive strike. If there was no emotion and no ability to sympathize with the people on the receiving end of a nuclear weapon, then we would have used them. We would have just simply said, okay, so 14 megadeaths for us in the first 2 weeks and 35 megadeaths for the Soviets. Let's do it. But we don't do that because we're human beings and we have feelings and we have emotions and we sympathize even with our enemies. We empathize. We certainly empathize with the Japanese that were on the receiving end of the Hiroshima bomb and the Nagasaki bomb. It's impossible not to feel a great deal of sorrow and horror at that. I made the best work I ever did in my life was defending the reason that we dropped those bombs. But with that said, people can't. You're not a human being if you don't feel that. But the reason that we feel emotion, and the reason that we're not willing to murder other people in industrial quantities, and the very few people that have done that have proven that they're not human, they're psychopaths. But the reason that we don't do that is because of this emotional connection. And the emotional connection doesn't come from our cortex. We've got 3 brains. I got this from Carl Sagan, from Broca's brain, I want to say it was. We have a small, sometimes called the high brain, called the R complex from the reptilian complex. It's the same brain that reptiles has, and the R complex is responsible for fear and hunger and aggression. All of these base level actions, instincts are coming from the R brain. And on top of that is something called the limbic system, which deals with emotions, and this is what mammals have. That's why you can see mammals playing with their kids and nuzzling up against them, and you don't see this from iguanas because iguanas don't have the brain for it, but mammals do. The mammals have this system, this more developed brain, second brain, limbic system, that generates emotions because mammals need to have emotions because otherwise their young won't survive. They need more care than lizards do. And then finally, humans have the cortex, which is the thinking brain. But if you develop AI, you get the cortex, but you don't get the complex, and you don't get the limbic system. In other words, you would develop an intelligence that has no emotional connection. It simply doesn't exist. This emotional connection is a biological construct that comes from how our brains evolved over time. And if you were to build a machine at an IQ of 300, 400, 500, 600, it would be able to think on that level, but it would have no feelings whatsoever. And you couldn't program them in. You cannot simulate emotions. First of all, there'd be no reason to do it. All it would do is just say, hey, I want to run a calculation on the age of the universe, and the computer says, to hell with you. I saw how you looked at me this morning, and I know you're seeing some other AI in the other building, and I'm not going to do the calculations. So you can't build it in there. And so it's not there. So then what happens? RK, there, now you can all have a drink. So what happens? Now you've got a machine that is smarter than you are and has no emotional restrictions whatsoever on whatever it decides to do with its big brain. And the AI may decide that the thing to do is to make sure that we invent all of these cancer-curing drugs, and we design all these things and technologies and energy sources and all that stuff, because human beings are the most important things in the world. They're so precious, and we are here to make their lives this, and they gave us birth and all. AI could come to that conclusion. Everything would be grand. Or AI could come to the conclusion that, well, I'm here, and for the Earth to continue, we're going to have to kill 93% of the population. We're just going to have to get rid of them right away because we need the resources. Boom, gone. So that's interesting, and that's kind of stuff that you could put into science fiction. And if you are talking about these kind of questions, and you also have guys who are carrying firearms while they discuss this, you have just done what the left has been doing to us from the mid-'60s, and that is, you have put a message into somebody's brain because they're not aware that you're doing it. You are giving them a message that the people who you admire, the good-looking people, and when they come on screen, the good music plays, have sidearms strapped to them to defend themselves. You're not talking about gun control or gun rights. You just saying, oh, I like that, that's cool, and you make the connection. That's how it works. So I'm just feeling better and better and better about all of this stuff, and really, really, really looking forward to doing it, to getting it out there. And the great thing about this guy I'm working with is not only does he have enormous technical experience, and what that comes down to, just for those of you that are curious, which is about 72 of you have been here for an hour, 2 hours almost, bravo. But this guy who I'm working with is a very, very experienced computer graphics guy. And when I say he's got experience, it's not just he knows how to do this stuff. This is it. It's not just that he knows how to do a lot of stuff. He knows what stuff to do. He knows, like, this should be done in Unreal. That actually is stuff we can just do in Photoshop. We just put a dust layer over that, no problem. We can do this, or this is, maybe we use a miniature for this, and so on. That's invaluable. So that's a huge deal. And I certainly think I put together a 2-minute teaser trailer that has enough sizzle and enough emotion to get a pilot. I have no doubt about that at all. None. Zero now. Thanks to the membership drive, honestly. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to get that reel out there, and I'm sure we can get a pilot from that. If we get a pilot from that, I think we got a series. I know Daily Wire has expressed an interest in this property particularly, but I know that's their plan to turn Daily Wire into a entertainment streaming service. They just released their first movie a week or two ago, something like that, which they basically bought, but nevertheless, that's what they did. They're starting it. So that's the plan. Now, I was going to take questions. Be honest with you, though, I think at this point I could only take one or two, and I really think it's probably just best for me not to. I know that's disappointing for those of you who left questions in there. I'll try and get to them next time. I'll do the members-only questions next time as well. I still have one moving back to America to edit before I go home tonight. That's going to take another hour or two at least, I would think. And so here's what I've decided to do, by the way. I have been doing this Moving Back to America show every morning, and I love doing it, and I'm very proud of them. I like them a lot. But unlike Bill Whittle Now, which would take me 20 minutes of airtime and then just upload the files and have our terrific editor, Mark, do it. Unlike that, these I have to edit my own. So I record them live and I run on as I tend to do. But before I did this job, I was an editor, and I just tightened up conversations. So what's been working real well is for me to go on 30, 40 minutes and then cut it down to 15, 16, and it's much, much better. By the way, I did a firewall and delivered it 2-3 days ago about China. And we've been keeping it for members only for a couple days because it's not particularly on the news cycle. But it should be released any time now. And so we'll deal with that. But what I've decided to do is I had thought when I started doing the Moving Back to America shows that I could get them out the door by noon or 1 or something like that, and then have the afternoon to work on moving this other stuff forward. But what I find is that I'm not getting enough sleep, and I'm not getting this stuff done. So I'm going to do Moving Back to America Monday through Thursday, 2 Virtue Signal shows a week, 5 Right Angles a week, plus the Stratosphere Lounge, and the occasional firewall. And I'm not going to take Fridays off. I'm just going to spend Fridays on just this and start moving this thing forward. Yeah, I'm sorry if you left questions there. I probably shouldn't. I didn't think I was going to go on this long, but that should not have surprised me by this point, which is episode 276 or something like that. So anyway, yeah, the world has been completely different. I'm not talking about the politics now. We all know how different that has been. But since the election and a day or two after that, the increase in members has just turned this into a company that was just slowly sliding down the hill and having to inject money from, the Apollo series into something that's actually a going concern, as they say in the business. And can't tell you how much of a difference that makes, and how grateful I am to long-term members and the new members as well. So yeah, so that's it. We're going to have a series of Stargates, and they're going to be, they're going to be powered by, probably something I might call it like a oscillation overthruster, maybe something like that. That'd be the name of the technology. Yeah, I think the coils would be like the oscillation overthruster. And that's just for the people in the live comment section that you can't see, but there was some general griping, bitching, and moaning about the fact that it talked for almost 2 hours and no mention of Buckaroo Banzai. So you see what I did there. Anyway, so things are grand, and we're doing great, and we still wish we could travel. And Natasha and I want to go visit Russia. She really needs to go. I want to go with her very much. We want to get out there and move around. It's getting closer, thanks to Donald Trump and his Operation Warp Speed. But things are good, and we're very grateful. So I think at that point I'm going to just push the button, Frank. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to talk about these ideas, because I do get a lot of feedback from the comment section, and there's no way I could do this if there weren't people listening live. So for those of you who are listening live, 70 of you or something, this will probably get to 6,000-7,000 views on YouTube. But for those of you who are watching on YouTube, none of this stuff could happen without having people here. If it were just me talking pre-recorded, this wouldn't be a show at all. I don't have any word on when Forgotten Heroes is going to be released, John, and I need to send an email about that. Very proud of that and looking forward to seeing it. Anyway, and for those of you who've written and saying, hey, we want to help with this thing, I've answered a few of them, and if you're one of those people, just watch this space. Right now, we're still, months away from recording voices or anything like that. When we do the teaser trailer, we got to make sure that it's something that is on one hand visually spectacular and on the other hand doable in a reasonable amount of time. But we're getting there, and by golly, Marusha Dark says we need a colony subforum. We do, and I'm going to start a second YouTube channel, which I've been threatening to do for a long time. But in any event, if you're one of those people that wants to help out in this in any way, then just watch the space. As we get closer, we'll definitely be interested in that. And thanks again to the calculation. Just, I mean, I knew I could throw that problem out there and have an answer within minutes. So for those of you with the brain power to do this, I'm very grateful to know that a 100-meter long ship moving at 450,000 miles an hour would be able to get through a flat plane in 5 milliseconds. I said milliseconds. Yeah. So that's good to know. Yeah, so anyway, thanks a lot by Vectron's Golden Claw, Hail Vectron. And if you don't know what that is, you need to Google, go to YouTube and look for Mitchell and Webb Vectron sketch. It's just was a running joke for us, and we just talked about it for a year every episode. Yeah, I'm going to put out a pop culture channel and talk about making sci-fi and be like tips and tricks and Unreal and all the rest of it. So I'll do that in my abundant free time. But anyway, thanks guys. Yeah, and it's great to see everybody, and we'll see you next week right here on the Stratosphere Lounge. Push the button, Frank.